Welcome to Cinema Chop Shop. Watch, chop, retrofit.
Is this episode cursed?
Yep.
We're going to try it anyway. We're going to give it the old college try. Welcome to Cinema Chop Shop. This is a movie podcast and a pop culture adjacent podcast where we talk shit about movies.
Oh, big swear out the front gate.
Coming in hot.
Wow.
I'm your host, Brewboss Shawn. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Chelsea the Regulator.
I should be the one saying shit first.
Then say it.
I just did.
Okay. And we're very happy to be joined in the shop. It's been a long time coming. We've tried to have him on the show before, and it's finally worked out. We've got Todd.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm finally here. And actually, my attempts to be here date back a couple of years back when Travis was running things. And
That's what I was referring to.
The olden
just
days.
kept not working out. So I'm glad today finally did. Hopefully.
Well, this episode did its best to not work out. We originally scheduled it back in August, I think it was. And I think Todd had a cold and couldn't go. And then Chelsea and I got COVID the week before the reschedule. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, by the time we all got our shit together, we were into October and doing Hammer Horror Month. And so this is our first non-horror episode. But it is kind of horror.
It is horror.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We're talking about Suspiria, the 1977 release, as well as the 2018 release. So, we're going to jump right into it. Suspiria, 1977, was directed by Dario Argento. You might have heard that name before. It stars Jessica Harper, Stefania Cassini, Flavio Bucci, Miguel Bosé, Alida Valli, Udo Kier, know that name,
Oh, yeah.
and Joan Bennett in her final film role. The film is the first of the trilogy that Argento refers to as The Three Mothers, which also comprises Inferno from 1980, as well as The Mother of Tears from 2007. So let's get the show rolling. What do we think about Suspiria, 1977?
Probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And the first thing that jumps out at you right at the beginning of the movie is the colors, right?
Oh, yeah.
You see, first we see they're in the airport. They show where she's flying in from New York, etc. And then we get immediately this red color that becomes the palette of the movie, I guess.
Yeah, she's walking through the airport. That's got red, and then the flight attendants are dressed in red.
And it's, obviously in the airport it's muted because that'd be fucking hard. But she's wearing all white too.
Right. And then, of course, she steps outside into a ridiculous amount of rain.
Right.
And
Rain's like that all the time. Yeah. Duh, everybody knows that.
Which, of course, plays into the plot when we get to the studio. But it's talking about the color and the style still, though. Argento whips you across the head with that, and for me, I absolutely love that. I love the style that he establishes, and really what it does is it establishes a world that you're in that is not fully in reality. It's not the world that we know, right? The world that we know in isn't these neon colors and that sort of thing.
And to that point, the first time I saw this film, I did not like it, and I remarked on it. I recall that I've seen college theater productions with more realistic sets. And I think that, to your point, that is probably intentional. These very geometric shapes and really bizarrely overscaled, patterns and things on the walls, very unrealistic looking.
Right, and one thing that I thought of later was with the sets. It was almost kind of like those old silent German expressionistic films, particularly. And this is something I didn't notice the first time I saw the film, but you'll notice in certain scenes when Susie is walking past doorways and the doors are massive and the doorknobs are way like above her head and stuff. And so it sort of creates this, almost like she's a child walking through this world. And interestingly, I did read recently that apparently Argento originally wanted to cast children in the roles, of for the school, and the studio was very much against that, which you could certainly understand. Not wanting to show children getting graphically murdered, but I think some of those little touches are remnants of that. But in any case, it heightens that that sort of fantastical lack of reality. People have brought up Alice in Wonderland when talking about this with the secret passages and things like that. But it goes to your point as well about the sets and the strangeness of that. And so you say that didn't really appeal to you?
Not at the time, but I've learned my lesson since then.
You were fucking wrong.
Yeah.
It's okay. So the characters like clearly aren't aware of some of these elements, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure, because obviously they're aware of the ridiculous like foyer, like we're just pounding on the door. It's so beautiful.
I will say this. I will say this though. The dialogue very early on in the film, they even use the word absurd to describe things. So I guess in a sense they are a bit self-aware that they are in absurd situations. But in terms of being in these very almost two-dimensional sets, no, of course not. They're oblivious to it. This is the environment in which they live.
Right.
So we have some strange characters right out of the gate. When she arrives at the school, obviously she's stumbled onto a suicide, seemingly. Yes.
Air quotes.
Yeah. And
sort of. Yeah.
And things are pretty chaotic and hectic. And the rain really feeds into that as well. I mean, she's trying to get her fucking ass inside, and you've got all of this other chaos swirling around. The handyman, I made a note, looks like Eric Trump.
Oh, God. Now I'm going to have to go back and look.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll make a note of that.
He's got quite a pair of chompers, which I think they even gave an explanation for in the movie for why he had those teeth, but definitely a strange-looking guy.
So there's this strange focus on where she will be boarding, and there's a focus on money, how much it's going to cost. I mean, it seemed really weird because it's like they've invited her to this school, and then suddenly it's like they seem like they don't want her there. She's like an inconvenience.
Yeah, and this is one of those areas. I mean, the plot in this is, let's face it, even if you love the movie, it's not the tightest in the world, and there are a lot of contrivances to just kind of justify certain set pieces or certain things that they want to do. I think the money thing is a perfect example of that, because as you say, initially it seems like they don't want her there, and so they make it so that she has to go away and stay in town, but then they make it so that she has to come back. So that was a little
it was really weird. And again,
I don't really have a good explanation.
Other than the only thing I could use to explain it would be it just feeds into this chaos, this really bizarre setting, and you're meant to feel uncomfortable.
Oh yeah,
and to that effect, I think it works.
Right.
Chelsea, I've got a question for you, because you do have a dance background.
I do.
As a dance academy, was this place normal?
Oh God, no. And
I'm talking about like their routine and stuff. We know the setting is bizarre, but what about their routine and their day-to-day, the way they practice and things? Is that...
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're joining a company like that, you're treating rehearsal time much like the rest of us treat a regular job. Like you're doing it all day. However, the dancing.
That's what I wanted you to talk
about. It was so bad. And I'm so pissed off that they put her, Susie, in actual fucking point shoes. It takes a lot of training just to put those damn things on, and it can cause a shit ton of damage. And thank God she didn't break anything, because she looked like a fucking new little deer being born.
In the first Suspiria, too, I wonder, does it even matter that it's in a dance studio? Because this is one thing I noticed between the two different ones, is that the dance plays very little part of the plot in the first one. There aren't that many scenes of them dancing, as you say. When we do see it, it's not very good.
No.
Even for someone who knows nothing about it.
It's just bad.
And then the second one, of course, it's a huge factor in the plot and very integral. I mean, it almost seems like in this Suspiria, it could have been, clarinet school or something like that.
That's a good point. And I think in the second half of the episode, we'll touch on that in terms of these broad brushstrokes. They're just there as set pieces to get the point across for the cool graphics and graphic violence.
Yeah, I want to come back to that after we've talked about both of them and we contrast them a little bit.
Let's do that. I made a note. Of course, my notes are strictly linear. I did this as I was watching the films. Everyone looks like Lorraine Newman from Saturday Night Live, the really anorexic, skinny one from the original cast.
Okay, well, you're talking about a dance company in the 70s. Yeah, I'm
just
sure
making
that's pretty fucking true.
That's just
to
an observation
size
I
there.
had. I'm not saying it was a
We've just
insightful one.
recently got a Misty Copeland who is a normal sized body ballerina within the last 5 years.
I know.
So
Yeah.
And yes, redheads can be ballerinas.
As we've learned, and we've schooled other podcasts on that.
I'm just fucking making the point.
That's a note for you, Dr. Bob.
Yeah.
And Dr. Husband. Maggots on the ceiling.
Another
was
contrivance, a huge one, because what does it actually mean? Nothing. It's
It
just
looks
something
cool.
Yeah, it's just a way to get them off the second floor and all into the that one room so that they can have the scene where the mother is behind the curtain, right?
And it's accompanied with strangely sped up music, which we should note. The music for this film
Hang on, let me get to a different point here.
Never mind. Go ahead.
Okay, so the maggots are stupid and we don't know why, but they look cool. But like, does every building or ballet school have just a room that's filled with barbed wire? Like, is that just a fucking thing that happens?
Yes, this is our barbed wire room.
Okay, I was just making sure. I was like, that's very strange.
That's how they punish the dancers for overeating.
Okay, well then that tracks.
Yeah. The music is done by the band
Goblin.
Yeah.
I'm not really familiar with their other work.
They work with Argento a lot, actually. Interestingly, and I think he's maybe a quasi member of the band, or was.
That tracks.
They usually, yeah.
It seems like if what's his face Fincher is it Fincher? Or is it Fincher can have Trent Reznor, then Argento should be able to have
I
Goblin.
got you. Yeah. You kind of have your ride or die.
Hell yeah, but I think the first one they did with him was Deep Red, and the story was really interesting because he was supposed to work with somebody else on the music with it, and then they like got into a fight, and he was like, "Fuck you, you're not doing this." And I turned to Goblin, and he was like, "You have 24 hours, go."
And I'm a huge fan of the score of this movie. I think it really heightens the unreality, and it's got a fantasy sort of
Unsettling.
vibe to it. Very unsettling. In my mind, probably in that top 10 of most distinctive horror scores, probably. I really like it.
It was done before the movie was made. He would blast it on the set,
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
right?
Okay. I made a note about the little boy.
Yes,
the-
Albert.
The strange.
And he's wearing an outfit like he's Lord Fauntleroy or something
Well,
like
that was my comment. He has a strange outfit as if he's from another time, and there's no explanation whatsoever. The kid's just there, and then he just kind of factors out of the story completely.
I think my interpretation of that is that these witches are of various ages. Albert probably is like, I don't know, I'm guessing like actually from the 19th century or something like that, and is somehow suspended. I don't know. I mean, of course, they give no explanation for this, but they're throwing a bunch of weird characters at us. The woman who, I guess, do we interpret that as his mother?
Yeah,
the woman that's with him, or
spoilers? They're all witches.
Right? Well, here's the thing, and I know you guys are going to touch on it huge. I didn't dive down this rabbit hole nearly as much as you guys did, but you were noticing a lot of like German Ottoman stuff in the 2018 remake. You're still dealing with a post-war Italy that feels fucking guilty, and that shit exists in the 77 Suspiria, just not outright. It's so subtle. And I heard a couple of things, but I was like, fuck, I don't want to go down this hole.
One scene in the film that bothered me the first time I saw it, and it was just how poorly it was crafted, and even on rewatching it still bothers me. The blind man with the dog.
yeah.
When the dog attacks him. There's so many cuts in the clearing as he's approaching. It's just like ridiculously prolonged, and then there's never an explanation of what provoked the attack.
The closest I can come to an explanation, I think this is just another one of those set pieces that Argento wanted to get in there. Again, Italian horror is famous for that. Fulci and others. They think more about images rather than plot so much, and so for whatever reason he was drawn to this particular one, which I find kind of underwhelming.
I do too. That was my point. Is that this really strange shoehorned kind of scene? Like the guy didn't really even have to be blind. He didn't, but then you have this puppet head dog attacking him, and it was just poorly done. It was just like, why did you want to put this in if you knew it was not going to be really good?
So there are two things I can think of. One is because he attacks Albert, and it's established from what the blind man says that this is a very gentle dog. It's a service dog. We know that Albert and his mother are weird, which of course we already knew anyway, which is why, did we need that extra thing? The animals always know, right? And so this is what the evidence is. The animal knows that or senses this about her. Why do they have to kill him? When he leaves, he makes it a point to say, I know this is more about than dancing or something like that. Something to that effect. He's indicating that he knows what really goes on there. And now that he's mad, I guess, they've got to get rid of him. But it really is a stretch.
I think that it is kind of a turning point in the movie, though, because this is when shit starts happening. After this, things do kind of speed up with all the weird, crazy shit that just starts, happening in terms of the plot.
Can we back up just a second? So
Absolutely.
you keep saying it's a suicide. Is that just because she ends up hung from a noose?
Yeah.
Because, and this is another thing, maybe we should talk a little more about that opening scene, because you have, she looks through a window, and then she sees these eyes, and then all of a sudden this hairy arm, like George the Animal Steel, comes popping through, mashes her face against the glass, kind of a cool scene, and then starts stabbing her, right?
Yeah.
So was the noose supposed to... The only reason why I ask this is because it would make sense for the noose at the end to be intended to give the witches an excuse to say, oh, she killed herself.
Yeah, that's all.
That's what I'm referring to.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, but they never say that themselves, do they? Don't they refer to a murderer or something like that?
I think the detectives kind of, don't they like allude to it as...
I think it's more ambiguous, and that's why we're having this debate.
Yeah. I don't remember them trying to sell, because I remember the conversation they were having with the cops, and I don't remember them trying to sell them on a suicide, although it would have made sense for them to do that, though.
And her interest is, the girls' interest in the dance instructors is not because of this girl that's dead. It's, where the fuck are they going? What the fuck are they doing? That's really strange.
Yeah, right.
Not this dead girl.
Right. Yeah, and that's, with this movie, that's what, if you're someone who wants everything to make sense and to have a nice, clean plot, you're going to hate this movie, because that's not the point. And Argento's obviously a talented filmmaker, so he knows this. He's just trying to get a particular style across, a particular feel. And so these little details that we're talking about, was she supposed to kill herself and all that? We're supposed to overlook, and frankly, I usually do.
Same.
Unless I'm just trying to nitpick it for a podcast. So.
Well, yeah, right? Here's the thing with him that's so interesting. I think he knows that he doesn't want to tell a narrative, like plot heavy story. He wants to give you just enough where you can make inferences that make sense, but he wants it to look and feel a certain way that will help get you there.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's supposed to be disorienting.
Yeah.
Just like the character, the protagonist, they're disoriented. I think we're supposed to join in with that disoriented feel.
Back to the music thing.
Yeah.
Just talking about that. One thing I love about Argento, and I don't know, maybe other filmmakers do this, but in the horror category, it doesn't happen that often. Normally, as like the kill thing is happening, it's fucking dead silent, and then they hit you with the jump scare, where he just fucking cranks the goddamn volume, and there's like drums banging, and it just adds to this chaos and like makes me feel a certain way, but I'm like, holy shit, that's far more effective than a goddamn jump scare.
No, actually, that's a great point in that opening scene too. When you think about that, there's just this pulsing music the whole time,
and then when it's
that creates
done,
this, and rather than trying to like lull you out of something, it's trying to make you, I guess, anxiety riddled.
like we're supposed to feel what they're feeling, I guess.
Yeah.
And then like after it's done, the music kind of levels off a little bit, and you're like, what the fuck just happened?
Right. Again, back to that disoriented sort of a feel.
It's
That definitely plays
amazing.
into it. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the music of how it's used in this film.
We made a comment early about some of the colors. There's a scene that happens after the blind man scene, and it's like she's falling asleep and the lighting is all green, but there's like this red spotlight outside, and that drives her roommate to like go on the run or something. It's a really cool color composition.
Right.
And I think the biggest takeaway from somebody who's just casually watching this for the first time, beyond just the sheer strangeness of it, is just some of this really cool use of primary and secondary colors. It's just great design work in terms of lighting. It's some really fun stuff going on there.
Well, back to that. I don't know a shit ton about filmmaking because I'm not a filmmaker, but he shot it using a Technicolor camera, even though cameras were far more advanced at this stage, which I found really interesting.
And I love that look, too, of the old Technicolor look. And, of course, it wouldn't work for every movie.
No.
But I think it was a perfect choice for this one.
It reminds me of Anna Biller using the old studio lighting and the colors in her films.
I was thinking the same thing.
Those really rich reds, and
yes,
it's like you can today. Of course, you can in digital. You can go saturation and post, but there really isn't anything like those old color techniques where you're pulling these rich, vibrant colors. I just came across my note. Who stores that much wire like that?
I know, right? What the fuck?
So our main character becomes obsessed with finding out about the witches. She's directed to a professor, an expert on witchcraft. And there's a lot of exposition in that scene about witches, witchcraft.
Well, Kerr, I guess, is a psychiatrist, and he was a psychiatrist of was it Olga? Or that was how she was talking to him, and then he's the one that refers her to the witchcraft expert. So it's very convoluted.
Very convoluted, and then even after that's established, there's like this big bit of exposition. And if I had to pick apart one thing about the movie that really bothers me is that particular part. Is just like, come on, get on with it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot, but I guess you need some explanation for all of these crazy happenings. I don't know. That's what I guess that's where the balance comes in, and we'll talk about this with the second one too. Maybe the opposite problem, not enough exposition, but we'll
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree with you. That was probably overdone, although I don't know to what degree, because I do feel like we need some backstory, but maybe there was a better way to do it.
So she discovers the witches eventually. I guess, spoilers. She burns the whole thing down.
Yeah.
And I didn't catch it the first time, but on rewatching it, I said, "What about her classmates?"
So
she's a murderer.
I actually paid attention to they all had gone to the Bolshoi. What do you call it? The Bolshoi Ballet or whatever?
Yeah.
I'm pronouncing it wrong.
See,
probably,
I missed that detail.
Yeah, I picked up on it this time. So this is another one of those contrivances that they have to throw in, like, she's going to burn up her classmates. But yeah, there's some little throwaway line in there about them being gone for that.
There you go.
So that's how they get away with it, I guess. But yeah, she burns it down, similar to the end of just about any number of Stephen King horror things.
Just torch it.
Right. Let's just burn it down.
Wrap it up. And that's kind of the way the film does. I mean, it's just like, let's just burn it.
I love that scene though, just the look of it.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it doesn't make a ton of sense, but she finally remembers what she saw the girl saying, and which that's another reason why it has to be gushing rain, because she's 10 feet away from her in that opening scene and she can't hear what she's saying. And so we keep coming back to that. And then she finally figures it out about the flower that's on the wall. You turn it and it opens this little door, another Alice in Wonderland touch with that. And then, of course, you get the witch, reanimates the dead body of her razored friend.
Poor Sarah.
Which I liked that a lot. The kill of the witch didn't make a ton of sense to me. The witch made herself invisible, right? But then she can suddenly see her. Why didn't the witch just get up and walk across the room? I don't know. Could she not? Was she too old?
More head scratcher kind of things where it's just like, you just got to go along with the ride.
Exactly. So you can't think too much about it. But.
Well, and when you're talking about witches, like traditionally, old ugly ones have means to not be old and ugly. And that part really confused me too, because I was like, well, this isn't typically how these are presented, and that's in both movies.
The second one, though, does a better job of offering like an explanation for that.
But still, it doesn't seem like it should be that fucking hard.
Well, I think it's a good time for us to jump onto the second one.
Okay, thank God, because I have many things I want to say, but it's a comparison.
Yeah, so we got 2018 Suspiria, directed by Luca Guadagnino. Starring Dakota Johnson, Tilda Swinton in a dual role, Mia Goth, Elena Fokina, Chloe Grace Moretz, Angela Winkler, Ingrid Caven, Sylvie Testude, Renee, Sutendilk, Christine LeBout, and Jessica Harper, of course, makes a surprise cameo in the film.
Oh, one thing I forgot to say about the 77 one. She didn't have to audition to get her role.
No, they'd already taken care of that or something.
What?
The audition, off camera.
Oddly, though, I think that actually is one thing that strangely makes more sense in the first one than the second one, is that, you know, you wouldn't fly all the way to Europe unless you had already somehow secured a spot, right?
Yeah.
My inference is that they already knew about her somehow.
No.
Had a reputation.
Her agent called Argento. She had... I don't know if it was
in real life.
In real life.
About the film.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were talking about the...
She didn't have to audition. She like talked to him on the phone, and she's like, he spoke a shit ton of Italian. I don't fucking understand anything. And then I had the part. I was like, all right, that's cool. Good for you.
Well, this goes back to the fact they don't really care about acting in Italian cinema of this era. I didn't think she did a terrible job.
I didn't either.
But, you know,
minus
all
the
the
dancing.
dubbing and stuff. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, sorry, about 77, to go back to that one. There was like a whole romantic angle that they just dropped. Remember that? With the good-looking guy?
Yeah.
And they were setting up that they were going to, you know, he does this weird little wave to her.
Yeah.
When they're all in the...
and then they just abandoned the shit out of that.
And then he's just out of the movie.
Bye.
Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I wondered if they had planned to do more with that, and they just, you know... for whatever reason, dropped. I don't know. That was
I found this interesting because I didn't pay attention to the credits the first time I watched it, but it's co-written by Dario and his wife Daria.
La 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 la.
No. Dario and Daria. I'm sorry. When I found that out, I was like laughing for a good 15 minutes.
All right, so back to the 18's version. No. This was in the works from 2008. I think it was presented as being, this is not a sequel. They're just going to do our own thing and use the original as kind of a jumping off point. Tom York, of course, did the soundtrack for this, based it on Krautrock.
Yeah, which that was
We did a little primer on
discovery.
that before the show. Think Kraftwerk, Tour de France, and some other cool ones that sound just like Radiohead. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
We open this time instead of a disturbed student at the shrink's office, and she's just flinging accusations of witchcraft. So right out of the gate, you know, instead of the strange killing, you've got this girl who's obviously not well. There is more of a focus on dance in this movie.
Oh, heavily.
There are more women present in this film. Suspicious lack of men. And even the men that are in this film are kind of presented as fools.
Or they're not men at all, if in terms of who the actors playing them.
In one interview I saw with Luca, because I'm not going to try to say his last name at all, he said that the theme of the movie was about outcasts, and specifically a female outcast. And that's kind of the narrative he was trying to paint.
You know, Mia Goth, for me, really shined brightly in this film.
Oh, yeah.
I thought she was great.
She was definitely probably the highlight for me as far from an acting perspective.
Well, because the main person didn't act at all. Oh, shit. Were you recording?
That scene where Dakota has to do her dance at the beginning, and she's unwittingly hurting Olga in the other room.
Oh, my
through
God.
that dance.
Well, I was thinking of she was like a human voodoo doll.
Yes.
That's what I thought about that, which I thought was pretty awesome in terms of an inventive sort of kill scene.
Well, that speaks to the practice of sympathetic magic, And so we're really, really diving into like more realistic portrayals of witchcraft, at least in some regards. It gets a little freaky and wild and off the rails towards the end, but there is a nod to more grounded in quote unquote reality, witch practices.
That wasn't done by CGI either, that scene.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and I was like, holy shit, that girl is special.
Well, it's like, obviously, I can't say the word, prosthetics and green screen suit with her other limbs that they took out.
Well, we get that early reveal that they confirm the witchcraft and the rituals. I mean, it's pretty much established right out of the gate that this is...
Right, nothing is hidden from the audience.
Right.
No.
And I think it's interesting too that the film itself seems to take it doesn't really seem to judge them, the witches, for the most part. They're not evil, villainous people for the most part. I mean, I guess you could argue, the scene when they put the hooks in the girl and drag Olga, I guess, and drag her off. But for the most part, they're just shown in situations talking about their witchcraft in very practical ways and in some ways empathetic ways towards...
I think that it plays into, and this is another theme for this movie that's independent of the original Suspiria, is this, and it took me a second viewing to really catch on to it, the German Autumn, and understanding what kind of background they were painting this in, and I had to look up that weird hostage situation to understand what the time period was and exactly, and it's 1977. Just kind of making this commentary about how this coven of witches are trying to keep their tradition alive and together amidst this kind of politically turbulent backdrop of post World War II Germany, as well as crossing over into just only 10, 12 years from the fall of the Berlin Wall. I mean, so it's an interesting time that they're placing it in, and they kind of give us that background information to make those discoveries for ourselves. If you're not like me, I wasn't familiar with it. I had to look it up. So kind of like little Easter eggs for you to discover if you're not familiar.
Yeah, and they have no sympathy on the viewer from that angle in terms of like giving you context about that. Everything that we find out about the German Autumn is in the background on TV shows and things, and you might not completely be able to hear it unless you've got subtitles on and things of that nature. And so it did require, from my end, a little bit of research as well. And that did enrich my second viewing because I didn't know any of that the first time. And it definitely helped to explain some of the what the narrative is kind of going for there.
I thought it was interesting that Dakota Johnson's character came from a Mennonite background.
Yes.
Right.
I was just about to...
It was an interesting choice. I don't know if they were making a commentary about Mennonites.
Yeah, that was very...
I didn't get that impression, but just in terms of these witches who are doing ancient practices, going after a student whose religion I think that most people would consider to be a little antiquated, I guess, and I don't mean that in an insulting way for anybody who's Mennonite, just more just old timey.
Well,
I mean,
here's the thing. Do you know what Mennonites are? Have you been around them?
Yeah, I grew up with one of my good friends a year ahead of me in high school was Mennonite.
Well, and they speak German.
Yeah,
They're very, very German. I think he used it because she has this bizarre connection to Germany. And I think it helps the audience kind of believe it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think another thing, too, is the outsider element, because she becomes an outsider in the Mennonite community,
Yes.
right? She's essentially, I don't know if she's kicked out or her mother's on her deathbed later in the movie talking about, and I wrote down the quote that she says, "She's my last sin. She's what I smeared on the world." So that sort of, so going back to what Chelsea said earlier about the outsider element, I think she's an outsider, why she may have been appealing to the witches, and why she may have found them appealing, because as we find out towards the end, she kind of has to accept them in order for their plans to come to fruition.
we have a scene of the witches fucking around with the cops. and that is observed by Dakota and I think Mia in that scene. They're watching from between the books, and they're using their witches' powers to make the men make fools of themselves.
Right.
And I thought that was an interesting choice because it really puts a point on the feminist aspect of this film. The men who are in this movie play either a minor role or they're stooges, they're tools, they're puppets. And I thought that was a really neat scene. Shortly afterwards, you're introduced to the scene where Blanc is coaching Dakota on this dance that she's doing, and she wants her to jump ever higher, jump. And Dakota's disagreeing with her, saying, "No, I'm feeling grounded. I think the music is calling for me to be grounded." And of course, we all know, that the reason she's feeling being grounded is because Marcos is pulling her. Marcos is deep in the depths and the bowels and pulling her down. I thought that was a really neat illustration of this. Unbeknownst to Dakota, she's kind of being pulled in directions here at this point in the film. And
right, because there's a feud that is revealed slowly between the two witches, and we see early in the film the vote about which witch is going to kind of lead the coven between Marcos and Blanc. And interesting, for most of the movie, everyone acts kind of fine about it, but that's one scene, I think, where we start seeing it play out. And yeah, I think that was a really cool scene.
We should mention, we did at the top of the section, Tilda Swinton playing Dr. Kemperer as well. Interesting character, trying to find what happened to his wife during World War II. I'm not sure. I mean, do you think that was an effective character? I mean, the subplot there, bringing that in?
I don't understand it. That's one thing where I'm like, that doctor and Chloe Grace Moretz, why the fuck are you in this movie? You don't need to be. Jesus, go away.
Is it dead weight? I mean,
yes.
I'm having a hard time. That's one area where I also kind of have a hard time connecting the doctor's narrative with the rest of the themes in the movie.
I kind of think that there's something that just didn't quite land because...
Yeah, I'm sure there was an intent there that didn't come across, though.
I mean, other than Tilda playing a male role with age makeup.
And why did she need to do that? So I don't mind that at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, as we discussed beforehand, I had no idea the first time I watched it that was the case. So she did a terrific job. But why?
Yeah, remove his plot from the story completely, and I think you've got a fine movie. I don't think it really matters.
The only thing that's fun about that is, as they were doing promotion for it, she's not credited in the credits with that part.
Yeah.
And a running gag, so they'll ask her questions like, why did you want to play both parts? So they made up this typed message from the actual actor, or the fictitious actor, and he's like, "I'll never star in a movie again. This was fun, blah, 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 blah." Tilda reads it, and reporters will keep asking her about it, and she's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about. If you look at the credits and you just listen to the fucking statement I just read, it's not me." But it's really cheeky. It's really funny. It's cute.
But yeah, I'm having a hard time, and such importance is put on that. I have to assume that the director had something in mind to connect those together, but it just eludes me.
I wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
One of the cool things I thought about it, they had the map of the coven that was on the journal. Later on in this movie, we start getting into the really serious shit with the witches. That same pattern's repeated on the floor, and we're getting into that scene of craziness with the witches. Obviously, you've got this almost orgiastic kind of scene with these naked women, and they're doing their worship of Marcos, I guess, the vote. And Marcos is weird looking. Marcos looks like she's stitched together from multiple bodies.
So,
got this weird little
and then
baby.
that entity comes out of the ground. Was that Satan? Was that or was that the Tilda Swinton, or was that Blanc? Taking over that creature, or because by then she's been killed.
Or is that Suspiriorum that Dakota embodies at the end of the film?
Right.
So I heard a really great reference to what Marcos looks like. Do you remember in the 90s when they had those anti-marijuana ads, and there was like a girl deflated on the couch.
Yes.
I was like, this is your friend on pot. She's like, oh my
That's
God.
what she looks like, yeah.
I thought that was perfect.
It's really a bizarre and unnerving makeup. That little
Cronenberg-esque.
Yeah, that little baby arm sticking out of her left arm.
God,
is just
no.
strange.
Why does she look like that though, and some of the other witches don't? This is one thing.
That back to my point. Like, witches they don't want to be ugly.
Well, right, and that's why she's trying to take in part why she's going to take over. So that's what I'm curious about. Is she just way older than everyone else?
But if she's that much older and that much more powerful, why can they look like that and she can't? And some of that's not making sense.
I got the impression that there must have been some sort of power struggle beforehand, where Tilda was in power and Marcos was kind of like, well, you're going to get shoved into the closet. And that might just be her true form after years and years. And then you have this power struggle, and now Marcos is going to take over. And Tilda's destined to become old, weathered, and whatever. That's kind of what I was taking from it. Maybe she was just waiting for her opportunity.
Maybe that's why they're doing the vote, because they don't really get into the politics of why they're having this vote.
Yeah.
And so it could be a case where, Blanc is like the young, fresh person who's supposed to take over for Marcos in the eyes of some.
Yep.
I don't know. I guess that's one way you could look at it.
And of course, then you've got this moment of Dakota kind of flipping the script entirely. Everybody expects her to do one thing, and she just kind of does her own thing, and she comes forward at the end of the film as Suspiriorum.
What do you think about the question of the identity of the Mother Suspiriorum? Was the witch lying about being Mother Suspiriorum, or is it just one of those things like it's this mythical thing that someone's going to be at some point, and she just thought she was that, but she wasn't?
That's the impression I got, is that you have these pretenders to the throne kind of thing, and it just so happened that Dakota really was
like a messiah type of thing.
Where you've got all these people who pretend to it and mislead people and grandstand and what have you, and then you've got this person who just very meekly, quietly kind of just says, no, it's me. And then boom.
Right.
She's in charge.
It makes sense. Which, of course, is different from the first one where there was no question about who and I'm jumping ahead here, but there was no question about who the mother was, right?
Yeah.
But that adds political intrigue and stuff to the movie that I guess sort of juxtaposes the political intrigue that's actually going on surrounding the movie with the German Autumn and all that stuff. So,
all right, so we've kind of covered everything in detail. We're going to take a break. We're going to go to intermission. When we come back, we're going to pass judgment on these films, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some giallo elements in each one. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby and get ourselves some
witch's brew.
And new ballet shoes.
Fair enough. And we're back from intermission. I had to pee in the yard.
I did not.
And Todd chose to hold it.
Yeah.
Not me. He just held
That's a fucking
urine.
bold
Yeah, I
move.
like to add a little bit of anxiety to my performances.
That's good. Keep you on your toes.
So, yeah.
By the way, we've been Chelsea's been drinking her usual cocktail, but
Ranch water.
today Todd and I are enjoying a beer from New Anthem Brewing in Wilmington. It's called Dancing on My Own. I thought it was kind of appropriate for Suspiria. Yeah. So it's a double IPA, and it's pretty tasty.
And thank you for sharing. Yeah,
sure, man.
It's quite good.
You know.
I'll bring some next time.
I figure first time on the show, you deserve a little splash, but next time,
For sure.
it's on you.
For sure.
All right, so we're going to talk about the head-to-head. Let's talk about what we liked and didn't like about each one. Let's talk about clear-cut winners, clear-cut losers, if there are any, and what are your final takeaways for both of these movies, and anything that we left on the cutting room floor from the first segment.
Well, the first one, as I said from the opening, is one of my all-time favorite horror movies. So it was going to be a tough act for the second one to ever replace it in my heart. I did not like the first one the initial time that I saw it a couple years back, mainly because I just thought the plot was just too busy. I wasn't sure what was going on a lot of the time because with the autumn or the German autumn elements. There were a lot of other kind of subplots going on with it that I, wasn't quite picking up on. Second time I did like it much better once I had more context, once I'd done a little bit of research into the German autumn. That certainly helped. But I would also say that's kind of a flaw if your or viewers have to do a lot of homework in order to appreciate the movie. I did think it was on the long side. The whole element of the doctor, as great as Tilda Swinton was playing that character, I don't know what it was supposed to add to the witch narrative. I'm sure the filmmakers had something in mind, but it just didn't connect with me either time I watched it. And then the first one, I think, has a better sense of what kind of movie it wants to be, has a more assured director. He's not, if you're someone that likes a more clear-cut narrative, you're probably going to prefer the second one, but that's not what Dario Argento typically goes for, and he knows that, and he doesn't try to be anything he's not. And in that movie, he does an amazing job of what he wants to do, which is establish a terrific and unique style with what we talked about, with the colors and the lighting, with the music, with the fairy tale sort of feel to it. And really like a fairy tale, because most fairy tales are pretty grim, right? And kind of frightening, and that's kind of what it did. The weird sets, the weird characters that you don't really get an explanation for, but that's almost kind of creepier that you don't. And so for me, that one is just the champion if we're going to compare the two.
I friggin' agree. The first one's better. And I would just be repeating Todd. But the one thing about the second one that I loved, that I thought did better than the first. So there's not it's not a straight remake, obviously. It's kind of like a distorted, fucked up reflection of the first one. But Miss Tanner and Madame Blanc obviously are based on the same thing. Right. And Madame Blanc was fucking superior. I fucking loved her. She wasn't just yelling at these girls. She wasn't just this typical hard ass instructor. There was a softness and a gentleness, and she approached the character, who is based on a real person. Her name's Pina Bausch, I think, modern dance instructor. She approached the character as if it were a tree. It made sense in the way she dressed and her design, but that's kind of stuck with me because I want to go back and watch it now with that sort of in mind, just the way she broaches this character. And I'm wondering where her roots are. Are the roots in her coven? Are the roots in dance? Where is that stemming from? And I'm wondering if there was some sort of subtle clue with that.
Okay.
But I found that really interesting.
Certainly characterization and acting is much better in the second one, which if you give a shit about any of that.
Minus the lead, but...
Yeah, I appreciate the superior dancing in the second one.
Oh, of course.
I appreciate the more authentic feeling witchcraft in the second one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I loved Mia Goth's performance in a supporting role. I thought she was exceptional, and I thought that Tilda Swinton was very good. To Todd's point, I think there was some excessive baggage that could have been trimmed, and everyone who listens to me talk about movies, I believe in editing, and I believe that a lighter weight movie tends to go a lot further. So I to that end, I think the movie suffers. I did enjoy Tom York's soundtrack.
Oh, same.
Oh, yeah. It was great.
Chelsea has it on vinyl. It's beautiful. Those are the things that I enjoyed about the film. The baggage, I think, detracts from it. The Argento version, it took more of an appreciation of Argento for me to enjoy the movie in retrospect. I didn't like it the first time. I thought it was silly. I thought the sets were terrible. I thought it was just ridiculous and over the top. But I think that... now, with context,
It actually was all of those things that you just said.
It is,
Yeah.
and that's intentional. And I understand now the beauty of establishing some of these outrageous set pieces and some of these bizarre, chaotic scenes for the sake of being bizarre and chaotic. Yes.
I'm wondering if your newfound appreciation for old Suspiria has come from your love of Anna Biller.
No, it's not.
Well, then I'm shocked that the first time you watched it, you hated it, and you can show me something like The Love Witch and go, this is amazing, and not see those same fucking things happening.
Well, I agree with you on that point in terms of Anna Biller's work. Some of the stuff that she does is not the best, but I do like that calling back to an older time of filmmaking. No, what I'm referring specifically to is, some of the other Argento movies I've seen where he's setting up some of these equally outrageous scenes just for the sake of, I want to show you this thing. Check this cool thing out that I made. And it sucks that you have to be initiated into this level 1 character in terms of participation. You can't be, entry level and say, oh, I get it. It's totally cool with me. I don't know if anybody watching Suspiria for the first time, completely cold, devoid of any context, would enjoy it.
I did.
Okay.
I mean,
I think though it depends.
You've
on
proven
when,
me wrong, Chelsea.
I think it depends on when you come to it, though. I was already a big horror movie fan the first time I watched it, and this was back, of course, in the era when you had to rent movies to see them. So I was aware of Suspiria, had been aware of it for a long time, but I just couldn't get my hands on it. And so by the time I got to it, I was already sort of immersed in that sort of thing. But if you're not, I agree, you might be a little bit... Like, if I'd seen that, for instance, when I was like 18, 19, before I really got into the horror genre, probably would have been like, what the hell is this? Which is how I felt the first time I saw something like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Okay.
Or Clockwork Orange as well.
Okay.
oh, yeah.
Like, just kind of weird and like, what the hell's going on? I was too young, or not just too young, but I just hadn't seen enough movies that were kind of doing that sort of thing,
So for me, like, the first time I saw it, I can't deny that the colors and all of that stuff was super over the top, but it was the way that movie made me feel in those intense moments, and that's just a rarity.
And that's cool. I mean, that's an awesome takeaway that you experienced that. I think for me, it was lost on me the first time.
Out of curiosity, when did you see it for the first time?
We did it with a Giallo episode ages ago. It was
in the era of...
It was
Yeah.
within the context of this show.
Oh.
And
That's
wow.
why I'm surprised.
I didn't know what I was getting myself into, and I just was like, this is stupid.
So our viewers could dig that episode up and make fun of you for...
Hell yeah.
Fuck yeah.
I'm going to use it against you forever.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, I'm not ashamed of it, because now I can watch it and say, there's some really cool things that Argento is setting in motion. But that said, the acting substandard.
No, there are definitely a lot of things that you could rip for this movie.
So for me, which one do I like better? I think I'll always gravitate towards the original, just because it is so bizarre. It's so outrageous, and for its time, and this is kind of segueing into what we're going to talk about next. For its time, it was kind of a standalone feature. There weren't a lot of Italian supernatural horror movies like this being made at the time. We were coming off of Italian cop dramas, which
Giallo was big, that Argento was a big part of.
Yeah, but even then, Argento had said, "I'm done with Giallo. I'm not making another Giallo film."
He lied, but
yeah, exactly. But he had kind of said, "I've done it. I've made the great Giallo film, and another one that was pretty good too. I'm done." And so he had kind of said, "I'm going to make this supernatural horror film in a landscape where Italy was, and this isn't meant as an insult, but Italy would always react to what was happening in American film." And that's why you've got that long string of Italian westerns and Italian cop dramas. They were kind of feeding off of this American trend in film, and so it kind of stands head and shoulders above what else was happening at the time.
Yeah, or even in any cinema. I mean, it's if you think about what was going on in American cinema. I mean, The Exorcist was big around this time, and some of those sort of religious
Amityville Horror was
Amityville Horror,
contemporary of this movie.
And so this is kind of outside the realm of anything that was going on, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I can't think of anything to compare it to. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but it's a very unique, just like this horror fairy tale type movie. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love it so much.
So we did, as I mentioned, we brought this film up in our Giallo episode, and I don't want to get too terribly deep into Giallo itself, but the film, of course, has Giallo elements because it has this, and we're speaking about the original, of course. It's got Argento's thumbprint on it. Is it a proper Giallo film? What is it about it that is Giallo or is not?
Definitely not. I actually had a discussion with this last night in preparation for this with a friend of the podcast, Joey Poole. And he immediately, when I told him that was one of the things we were going to discuss, he said, no, it's not a Giallo. But, and I don't think it is, because really if you look at what Giallo is, so it's really a melding of several different genres, right? You have the crime genre, thriller, or crime/thriller, however you want to think of that. The slasher is a part of it. Psychological horror oftentimes plays in it. Sexploitation. And so those genres are kind of melded together into one unique sort of thing. So it's like, Hitchcock, if it was... I don't know, directed by John Carpenter or something like that. Although Hitchcock did do a movie that you could argue was Giallo in the early 70s called Frenzy, which is great, but I digress. But in any case, so you usually have like a serial killer it's a whodunit, right? You have a serial killer. They're usually, they're shown wearing gloves, and that's all you see of them, are these gloved hands, oftentimes. Usually, they commit a murder that is witnessed by a bystander. For example, in Tenebrae, I think is how you pronounce it, that we've all seen.
Tenebrae.
Tenebrae. So, I mean, you have this guy who writes horror novels, and then there's a copycat killer that pops up, and as people are wont to do, that he, the bystander starts investigating the crime himself. In others, a lot of times, like an Argento one, the bird with the crystal plumage. This guy's just walking down a sidewalk, and he witnesses a murder happening in an all glass museum,
which is a beautiful murder, by the way.
It is. That's one of my that's one of my favorite Giallo films. But anyway, this bystander just decides to start, when the cops flub it, participating in the investigation. When a female, though, so there are really two types of Giallo. You have the male-centered one, which is what I just described, and then you have the female-centered one, where it's a woman protagonist whose sanity is in question.
Opera.
Yes, a perfect example. And usually there's something about her sexuality that's at play here, whether it's her sexual awakening or she's being threatened sexually somehow. But the sexuality tends to play a factor in that, which goes back to the sexploitation angle that I mentioned earlier. And so anyway, to get back to, I'm kind of digressing here, talking about what a Giallo is, but most of these things that I just mentioned aren't really present in either of these films, would you say? Or maybe
Chelsea, what do you think?
Oh, God. I think you can make an argument that original Suspiria can fall into that category, for sure. Outside of just, like, the stylized look of it, at the core, it's not so much... It is sort of a whodunit, but it's like, where are they? So there's that element.
Right. And the bystander thing is definitely...
It is, right out the gate. And then the other thing, when you're talking about the female-centric one, they question her sanity. They're purposefully drugging her.
Right. Those, her diet that she gets put on, which we didn't touch on, but yeah.
So they're like manually manipulating this. And then the other thing, like another thing, a character suddenly remembers something right at the end of the movie that fucking helps everything. Again, very much present in old Suspiria.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah. That is true.
That is true.
I think there's a case to be made for sure that it could fall into that category. But I do understand both sides of this argument. I can see it from both points of view.
Well, one thing I didn't mention as I was describing Giallo is the stylized nature of it, which certainly Suspiria has. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I can see that. I think though that oftentimes why it gets lumped in there, and if you look at the Wikipedia page for Suspiria, it does say lump it as that. It's on the list on Wikipedia of Giallo, although other people argue against it. I think a big reason why is just the presence of Argento himself.
Right.
Because if you think of most of his major films that he's known for, with the exception of Suspiria, they are all Giallo films. The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Deep Red, Phenomena, Opera.
Well, and then I think the fact that he himself has said, I didn't want to make one, but I'm sorry, my dude, if you have your thumbprint on the birth of this genre, you're not going to be able to escape some of those things, and he didn't.
If it quacks like a duck, right?
Well,
that's a good point. Maybe he tried to put on a pair of gloves or something, but there was like a hole in the glove, and part of his fingerprint ended up on there. Yeah.
I really think you can be on both sides of the fence with this, and like I said, I can understand both sides. I see it from both ways. I guess I don't really have an opinion. Shawn told me that one of the things you wanted to talk about was, is this Giallo, is this not? And I was like, well, I just thought it was, because I mean I'm a little bit new to it. I just maybe about a year and a half ago kind of discovered this and started diving down the rabbit hole. But anything that I found initially right out the gate when we were doing this is like Argento's Giallo masterpiece, Suspiria. Fucking titles like that. So you just have this innate thing in your head already.
Right.
Yeah, I think that I was watching, in preparation for the podcast, a YouTube video, and I'll try to remember to plug it on our notes. His posit was, it's not as Giallo. And I think he used that as kind of bait to get you to watch it. And he does present the reasons why it's not, but ultimately he says it doesn't matter.
And that's true.
He says it doesn't matter that if it is or if it isn't. What matters is that it's this great standalone movie that kind of is its own creature, which I think is really cool in and of itself. You've got your Giallo influences from Argento's other work and his contemporaries. But then at the same time, you've got this really interesting, crazy, chaotic mindfuck of a movie that, stands on its own two legs.
I mean, it's to me, like, Argento, first of all, he reminds me of, like, a skinny version of Nick Cave in his younger days.
Okay.
So he looks interesting. But this motherfucker was, like, a trendsetter.
Yeah.
His first screenplay was a spaghetti western. In the time when those were fucking huge.
Right.
And then helps create this whole genre. Like, fuck, man. You do what you want to do. Like, you've peaked.
And interestingly, I did see somewhere where Giallo were referred to as spaghetti thrillers.
Spaghetti thrillers. I love it. It. All right. Well, I can see the hands on the clock pointing at the witching hour.
It is.
That was
so fun.
That was so lame. No, this has been fun. I think that both of these movies are a lot of fun to talk about and pick apart. And
because they're strange.
And hopefully it's been worth the wait for the listeners. I know that after 3 reschedulings, we finally did this fucking thing.
Woohoo!
We finally got Todd on the show.
Woo!
Woo!
And that's hopefully the start of a future trend.
Yeah.
Because I think that the Giallo movies deserve a deeper discussion, and we've got some other friends who want to get in on the act, so it might end up being a freaking 4-hour free-for-all.
I want to debate Joey about Suspiria.
Yeah, we need to get Joey back on the show. Joey's been hiding out from us for too long. Want to thank the special guest, Todd. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad I finally made it after multiple years, really, not just the last couple of months. But this was a lot of fun. I definitely want to do it again. So thanks for having me.
Good deal. Do you want to plug anything?
I don't have anything to plug.
Any movies that people absolutely must see?
Okay, so this is something Shawn and I were discussing a while back. Terrifier 2. So this is an evil clown movie. If you saw Terrifier 1, I actually did not like that movie. It doesn't really have much of a narrative. The gore that a lot of people liked, I thought was kind of overrated. But this second one is bonkers in the best possible way. The gore is, they clearly had a better budget for this one. You see someone's skull get ripped in two like a piece of paper.
All right.
Which and it looks great. They're not using CGI bullshit. It's old school, Tony Savini type of gore. There's an actual story here that has like a fantasy element to it, which was kind of bizarre. And you could tell that the filmmakers were having a lot of fun with their bigger budget. So,
despite the cast.
Yeah, and there was some bad acting in this. But particularly there's a young kid, a boy, who was not particularly good.
Oh my God, do the impression. Just do it.
The kid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That to be my ringtone.
It's terrible.
A dead-on impression there. But yeah, definitely go see Terrifier 2. One other one. If you are a fan of the 1978 Dawn of the Dead, they have recently released a 3D version of it in theaters. And that was wonderful. I had never seen it on the big screen
Is that
before.
the one in the mall?
Yes.
Okay.
It's set in the mall. Probably up there with Suspiria, one of my all-time favorite horror movies.
Nice.
And the remastering of this film is gorgeous. The 3D element was a nice touch, and it was just awesome to see it in a theater, which I never had after countless viewings. So those are the two I would mention.
Speaking of skulls getting torn in half and annoying adolescent actors, do not go see Black Adam. Okay. Chelsea, thank you for being the regulator.
Oh,
Have you got any plugs?
Don't smoke pot and become a deflated friend.
Because you might get confused with...
Yeah. Marcos.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, folks, that's it. That's what we're going to do for this week. Next episode coming up is going to be The Insane Slog. A Star is Born versus A Star is Born versus A Star is Born versus A Star is Born.
I think I'll be sick that day.
Yeah. So be ready in 2 weeks, because that's what's going to happen.
But also be kind to Travis about it.
Yeah.
Because I'll fucking cut anybody.
This is Travis's idea. Please contact us on social media. Please let us know what you think of the episode. We're at Cinema Chop Shop on everything except for YouTube. We're at Cinema Chop Shop Podcast, where you can watch a audio presentation of this very podcast.
Or you can watch my reaction to Psycho.
Yeah, look that up. That's always a lot of fun. And please tell your friends to listen to the show, like us, love us, rate, review, check us out, and do that sharing thing. And thank you for listening to the show. We love you, and this is why we do the show. It's for fun. Please remember to watch, shop, retrofit.
Treat yourself.
Trick or treat yourself.